Okay, hey, I'm super excited to be here today. Uh, the reason I'm making this channel and doing these reviews is because I just love to learn and I love to teach. So I figured this would be a way in which I can give back, but also still able to learn and take in all this information and just, be able to share it to people throughout the world. So cool. Let's rock and roll, baby. Okay, so my name is Dr. Locke Perrette. I'm a PharmD, and today we're going to be covering Andrew Huberman's podcast involved with flexibility. So there's a few principles on my channel here at Unlocked in which we're going to kind of break down all podcasts by. So one, I'm always looking for um, the maximum efficiencies with the minimum amount of effort. That's something that's important to me, and so I decided to design it this way. Two, I'm always going to do my best to try to stay below 20 to 30 minutes max, hopefully even shorter. Your time is super important to me, just like mine is important. Three, oh, I'm totally going to misspeak or mispronounce something or have a brain fart during this. Hey, man, I'm only human. Work with me here, but I'm going to do my best for you, okay? Sorry in advance. And four, this is all just my personal opinion. None of it should be reflective of Dr. Huberman. And also, in no way is this medical advice. This is just me taking the points that I thought were pertinent to this podcast lecture. All right, let's rock and roll. Okay, so why do we even care about flexibility? Um, that's something I always ask myself is why? Why on everything? Why does this muscle work? Why does this happen this way? So one, we lose about 10% of our flexibility every 10 years after the age of 20. Overall, of course, this is super helpful for balance, stability, posture, and elevating physical performance. The part where a lot of people don't know for the balance and stability, where that really comes into effect is as we age, one of the largest factors of comorbidities for elderly has to do with like just simple falls and breaks. So they may trip over something and fall and lose their balance, break a hip, and that is actually a huge issue for them. Also, some other interesting facts they covered were about pain tolerance. So, yoga practitioners in one of the studies was able to have a much higher pain tolerance than normal people. And then the last one, which is really crazy, was a rat study in which they stretched the rats. There is a way to stretch a rat. I don't understand it, but it's pretty cool. And they actually had a 51% reduction in tumor size from stretching. Now, in no way is this saying that if you start stretching, your tumor is going to reduce, but it was a cool fact, and I just thought I'd include it. All right, so let's look at how. So we covered why, now how. How should we stretch? Static overall is the best return on investment. The other ways to stretch weren't wrong, but at least in the studies he covered, that had the highest return on investment for the amount of time they put in. Also, this was really impressive to me. In the study, they used something called micro stretching. So that's defined as like, let's say we're going down and okay, let's just say here where I bent my hand back, that's where I'm feeling slight pain. Okay, so that would be 100% of my stretch according to the study micro stretching. So now we want to go from 100 and go to like 30 to 40% of that. That actually is more effective than stretching to where you're feeling pain. And that helped me out a lot because I'm horribly unflexible in my hamstrings. And any time I would try to practice, it would be so painful because I was always going to that max. So instead, now, as a quick rule of thumb for me, I go down until I feel a little bit of pain, then I just come back a little bit. It's just an easier way for me to understand where those spots are. And finally, consistency and frequency is going to pay off the most for long-term flexibility. In a perfect world, we'd want to be doing, say, a little bit of stretching, of course, every day. But um, you'll see later on as we go over the protocols. But I just want to kind of cover that for you. Okay, so how does this work? Like, why do our muscles need to stretch and whatnot? So, we're going to cover this very basic. There's a lot more into it, but very generally, we have motor neurons, and what they release is something called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine is what causes that constriction in the muscle. Um, And then also something else we're going to kind of be focusing on is something called sensory neurons, specifically the spindle fibers. These are the ones that sense stretch. So in other words, if my arm is about to break, say due to somebody like pulling or an arm bar, that stretch is going to send a signal to my brain and then say, hey, whoa, we're about to stretch. We need to go ahead and constrict, or I think of it's like spindling it up. That's just a stupid way for me to remember it. So based on some of this, we're going to actually see how we can manipulate these spindle sensory neurons into helping us with stretch. Okay, so how can we apply? So we're going to talk about something called antagonistic or opposite muscles. An example of this is your hamstring and your quad. Okay, so for example, it's like if you have your quad muscle, the opposite or antagonistic muscle would be the hamstring behind it. Okay, and so when we flex that quad muscle, it ends up by flexing that, it's relaxing that hamstring muscle. Okay. Maybe not every part of it, but a majority of it. And by doing that, when we flex those quads, we're relaxing those spindle fiber neurons, which are the ones that tell us, ooh, we've maybe stretched too far. Okay. Now, this procedure will work for literally any muscle that is antagonistic of each other, but it's a lot easier to do with larger muscle groups rather than, say, your finger or a toe or something in that nature. So, can we get to the good part? Like, what can I actually do to make this better? So, first, let's do an example of we're going to put our back up against a wall and we're going to bend down and just find a spot of where we're about as far as we can go. Don't hurt yourself, but just make the mark. That's your control, we're going to call it. Okay. So now we're going to flex or contract our quad muscles as hard as we can for 20 to 30 seconds. But don't do it to where it's going to hurt you in any way. You want to flex as hard as you can to where you feel comfortable. We're going to hold there. After 20 to 30 seconds, we're going to relax that muscle and we're going to repeat that first thing we did. Same thing, back against a wall, go down. And could you go any farther? Now, for me, when I do this, I'm able to go almost an inch to an inch and a half farther when I actually flex that quad hard. This blew my mind the first time I did it. It was like, wow, I can apply this to any muscle group in which I have tightness or I'm not quite as flexible at. The other benefits of how we can affect with this, with working with antagonistic muscle groups in training, we're just going to say opposite, hopefully, from now on, so I don't mess it up, is when we start to work out opposite muscle groups, we actually can usually get a larger volume of work in those subsequent sets. So, for example, let's say we're doing biceps and triceps, okay? Opposite muscle groups, right? So, let's just say our first set we do our bicep, our second set we do our tricep, third set, and say we're going to failure. By the second set of the bicep, when you're working out that tricep, you're actually relaxing the muscle of that bicep and it's allowing it to almost recover and also have a greater range of motion slightly. And so typically, you're going to be able to do, say, a larger volume on your second, third, fourth set than you typically would. So this is something that's doesn't exactly have to do with stretching, but because we understand these concepts, we can actually now increase our training and volume of work by just understanding these bare minimum fundamentals. So, this is like our base protocol. What we typically do is the static stretch is our highest return on investments in the study. So, the main things we really need to know is you have to at least stretch at minimum twice a week. More than twice a week is preferred, but that's the absolute minimum. We would prefer more frequency in lower sets, but however you choose to do it, you do it once a week, you're not going to get any benefit here. Two, we need to do at least a minimum of 5 minutes of stretching per muscle group per week. So when I say per muscle group, if we're stretching the hamstrings, that's a muscle group. Stretching my quads, that's a muscle group. It doesn't mean that if I finish stretching my hamstring for this week, my, arm flexibility is going to be that much better. Third, everything in this study was used at a 30-second hold. So I can't tell you if less than a 30-second hold is going to be beneficial, but in the studies, that's what they were using. So What I did is a very basic mock-up of, say, if you're doing 30-second or a minute hold per set. So for example, on if we're doing a 30-second hold, so we do 2 sets of those on a hamstring, which equals a total of 1 minute, right? 5 days a week, that gives us our 5 minutes. So let's say we wanted to do 4 sets and we only did it 3 days a week. That would equal to 6 minutes. Now, me, what I've been doing when I've been practicing this is I've been actually just doing a minute hold while I'm watching TV, laid back, and say I'm watching a show. Oh, cool. I'm going to knock out my 1 minute. I'm watching. It's that easy. You know what I mean? What's the point of learning these things if we're not going to actually apply them? Um, and also, finally, to cover the last point, I decided to include some great quotes from some of our famous philosophers. This one is by the legendary Ted Theodore Logan and also William Bill S. Preston Esquire. And this goes to as be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Look, man, I'm so happy y'all are here. I appreciate you. And hey, man, just go do nice for someone else and y'all be awesome. Have a great day.